If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain how I found out about this. It's free. It's on your app store. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right now from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Please, I urge you, don't waste another minute. I wasted 3 years. I attended all kinds of events to learn all the steps. I was so confused, and it was right here. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Do it now. Good Saturday, April 10, 2021. For the Heart and Home podcast, I'm Sabah Fakuri, your host. We continue our usual news roundup for the week of April 5. Our top story, remembering the Duke of Edinburgh. Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth II's husband for more than 7 decades, died yesterday, peacefully in his private apartment at Windsor Castle. He was 61 days away from what would have been his 100th birthday. Prince Philip had been at the royal residence since March 16 after being released from a month-long stay at a London hospital for treatment for an infection and a procedure for a pre-existing heart condition. The Queen and Prince Philip had the longest royal marriage in history, and on their golden wedding anniversary in 1997, the Queen offered a glimpse into their relationship. Quote, she said, "He has, quite simply, been my strength and stay all these years, and I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim or we shall ever know." In today's New York Times obit, it said he died during a time of palace turmoil, not because of Prince Andrew being a person of interest in an international sex trafficking case. The New York Times said he died just as Buckingham Palace was again in turmoil, this time over Oprah Winfrey's explosive televised interview last month with Philip's grandson, Prince Harry, and Harry's wife, Meghan. The couple, in self-imposed exile in California, lodged accusations of racism and cruelty against members of the royal family. End quote. He was known as Phil the Greek for his contemporaries, with rather an interesting backstory. But for the generations that succeeded him, he epitomized a very British stoicism. His life began with his birth as a member of the Greek royal family and ended as Britain's longest-serving consort. Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark was born June 10, 1921, in a villa on the Greek island of Corfu. A year after his birth, Philip's parents found themselves refugees after a coup in Greece led to their exile. Philip grew up in Paris and later attended prep school in England. His parents were Prince Andrew of Greece and Princess Alice of Battenberg. His father served in the Balkan Wars in 1913 and served in the Greco-Turkish War from 1919 to 1922 as a major general. Following in his father's footsteps, the young Prince Philip was sent to the Royal Navy Academy at Dartmouth and joined the British Navy. While Philip served with distinction in an illustrious naval career, including service during World War II, his Mountbatten uncle devised plans for an introduction to then Princess Elizabeth. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was only 8 years old when she first met. Well, actually, she saw him. She saw Philip Mountbatten in 1934 at the wedding of his cousin, Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark, to Elizabeth's uncle, Prince George, the Duke of Kent. Elizabeth would not become the heir apparent until 2 years later, after her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated so that he could marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson. During the late 1930s and early 1940s, the two met several more times. She was 13 when she was formally introduced to Philip. The two began exchanging letters afterward. Their next meeting was at the Royal Naval Academy in 1939, where the 18-year-old Philip was a cadet when Elizabeth was visiting with her parents and sister, Princess Margaret. From that moment, in the words of her oldest and closest friend, Mrs. Margaret Rhodes, she was, quote, a one-man woman. Her governess recorded that Philip's, quote, Viking good looks made quite an impression on the young princess, who became smitten with the blonde, blue-eyed Philip. Biographer Sally Bedell Smith writes that Elizabeth's father, King George, liked Philip. He told his mother that Philip was intelligent and has a good sense of humor. But he thought his daughter was too young, and the Greece-born prince lacked the royal titles that critics considered vital to marry the future queen. Eventually, King George assented, but he made one request to Philip to delay formally announcing their engagement for 1 year so that Elizabeth would be 21. In 1946, when Philip was in his mid-20s, King George VI gave Philip permission to marry his daughter. The royal wedding took place at Westminster Abbey on November 20, 1947. There were 2,000 guests in attendance, and it was broadcast on the radio all around the world. They had 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Prince Charles was born first on November 14, 1948, and Princess Anne on August 15, 1950. Biographer Ben Pimlott called this period the most normal of her entire life. The young couple spent much of their time in a royal residence in Malta, where Philip was stationed in the Navy. In 1952, Elizabeth's father, King George VI, died, and she became queen at 25, much sooner than they had anticipated. Queen Elizabeth's new role challenged their marriage, as the Crown fans saw this dramatized during season 1. On February 16, 1960, their son Andrew Albert Christian Edward, Duke of York, was born. Prince Edward Anthony Richard Louis was born 4 years later on March 10, 1964. Prince Philip made history by being the first royal husband to be present during the delivery of their 4th child. The Duke of Edinburgh was actually holding his wife's hand as their youngest was born. Ingrid Seward wrote in the book My Husband and I, the inside story of 70 years of royal marriage, according to The Independent. The Queen was 37 then, and she had asked her husband to be there after reading women's magazines that stressed the importance of involving fathers in childbirth. But on a different front, Philip, who called himself the refugee husband, entangled with Prime Minister Winston Churchill over whether his children could take his surname, Mountbatten. In private, Philip called his wife Lilibet. He always walked 3 paces behind her. He kept the family together so she could be queen. They marked their 73rd wedding anniversary on November 20, 2020. Buckingham Palace said he completed 22,219 solo engagements since 1952, gave 5,496 speeches in his travels to more than 76 countries, authored 14 books, and served as patron to 785 organizations and made 637 solo overseas visits before retiring 4 years ago. Earlier this year, he was admitted to King Edward VII Hospital as a precautionary measure on the advice of His Royal Highness's doctor after feeling unwell. The Duke later underwent a successful procedure for a pre-existing heart condition and then was discharged from hospital on March 16. Now, you will recall this was all happening while the hype around the March 7 Oprah interview with his grandson, Prince Philip, and his American wife, Meghan Markle, who had left full-time royal service a year earlier. In addition to his wife, Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip is survived by his 3 sons, Charles, the Prince of Wales, Andrew, the Duke of York, and Edward, the Earl of Wessex, and 1 daughter, Princess Anne. He has 8 grandchildren, Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, and Prince Harry of Wales, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie of York, Peter and Zara Phillips, as well as Lady Louis Windsor and James Viscount Severn. He also has 10 great-grandchildren, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, the children of Prince William and Duchess Kate, Archie, the son of Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan, former, and along with a great-grandson from Prince Andrew's daughter, Eugenie, 2 great-grandchildren from Princess Anne's son, Peter Phillips, and 3 great-grandchildren from Anne's daughter, Zara Tyndall, an Olympic equestrian. Philip's Duke of Edinburgh title is expected to pass to his younger son, Prince Edward, Earl of Wessex, once Prince Charles becomes king. What happens next is that after the 8 days of official mourning, with flags on major public buildings and military establishments, especially the naval ones, given the prince's service in the Royal Navy, flying at half-mast, the Queen will spend another 30 days mourning in private. After that, she most likely will resume her official life. In the 4 years since Philip stepped back from official duties, she had fulfilled official life on her own, and she has prepared for it, said an old friend. She also has her faith to sustain her. It is central to her life, and it means she looks confidently forward to the time when she and he are reunited. Her last engagement was on March 31. The last photograph of Philip with the Queen was on November 2020, where the Duke and the Queen looked at their homemade card given to them by their great-grandchildren, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, for their 73rd wedding anniversary. And as is customary, the royal announcement of the death of Prince Philip was posted on a Buckingham Palace gate. I will post some additional stories if you want to read more on the coverage on CNN, in the Daily Mail. Today posted pictures to chronicle Prince Philip's lifetime of laughter and lasting love. And today also members of the 104th Regiment Royal Artillery fire a 41-round salute to Prince Philip on the grounds of Cardiff Castle in Wales. The Sun. They said, "We're all weeping with you, ma'am." And of course, the front page was of photos of her and Prince Philip when they were married. Prince Philip in his military outfit, and then a portrait of the two on the front cover. In a Vanity Fair excerpt from a biography that's due out later this year in June, Robert Jobson writes that the Queen's husband was, quote, almost a modernist at heart. There has been a tabloid tendency in recent years to dismiss him as a rude old man from a bygone age. But from his fascination with television and space travel to his conviction that the royals must remain relevant to the public, Philip had his eye on the future, even when so many forces within the palace seemed more committed to the past. Interesting to see in the Times today the choice of royal using an old photograph that has Princess Charlotte when she was perhaps 3. She's covering Harry's face, and Her Royal Highness Camilla Parker Bowles' hat covering the face of Prince Andrew. Attending thousands of events, besides his wife, Prince Philip developed a reputation for off-the-cuff remarks. Steer Pike gathered 74 of the Duke's best quotes from 74 years by the Queen's side. Here a few are of my favorites. I'd much rather have stayed in the Navy, frankly, he said of his role in 1992. If it doesn't fart or doesn't eat hay, she isn't interested. On his daughter, Princess Anne. I'd like to go to Russia very much, although the bastards murdered half my family when asked in 1967 he would like to visit the USSR. I never see any home cooking. All I get is fancy stuff, he said in 1962. Dontopodology is the science of opening your mouth and putting your foot in it. A science which I have practiced for a good many years, he said to the General Dental Council, quoted in Time in 1960. They're not mating, are they? When he saw 2 robots butting into one another at the Science Museum in 2000. You bloody silly fool, he said to a car park attendant who made the mistake of not recognizing him at Cambridge University in 1997. No, I would probably end up spitting it out over everybody, declining the offer of some fish from Rick Stein's Seafood Deli in 2000. Holidays are curious things, aren't they? You send children to school to get them out of your hair, then they come back and make life difficult for parents. That is why holidays are set so they are just about the limit of your endurance. On a 2000 school visit. People think there's a rigid class system here, but dukes have been known to marry chorus girls. Some have even married Americans, he said in 2000. We don't come to Canada for our health. We think of other ways of enjoying ourselves, he said on a trip to Canada in 1976. Oh no, I might catch some ghastly disease, he replied when asked to stroke a koala bear in Australia in 1992. Get me a beer. I don't care what kind it is, just get me a beer, he asked when he was offered the finest Italian wines by the country's prime minister at a dinner in Rome in 2000. You have mosquitoes. I have the press, he said to a hospital matron in the Caribbean in 1966. Damn fool question to BBC journalist Carolyn Wyatt at a banquet at Élysée Palace after she asked the Queen if she was enjoying her stay in Paris in 2006. Oh, it's you that owns that ghastly car, is it? We often see it when driving to Windsor Castle, to neighbor Elton John after hearing he had sold his Watford FC-themed Aston Martin in 2001. I wish he'd turn the microphone off, he said during Elton John's performance at the 73rd Royal Variety Show in 2001. Are we going to need earplugs? He said, upon being told that Madonna was singing the James Bond theme tune in 2002. And he asked actress Cate Blanchett, can you fix my DVD? Because he said she worked in the film industry when he met her in 2008. "What do you gargle with, pebbles?" he asked Tom Jones after the Royal Variety performance in 1969. "What about Tom Jones? He made $1 million, and he's a bloody awful singer," he said to a small business lunch when asked about how difficult it is in Britain to get rich. If a cricketer, for instance, suddenly decided to go into a school and batter a lot of people to death with a cricket bat, which he could do very easily, I mean, are you going to ban cricket bats? He said after the Dunblane shootings in 1996. British women can't cook, he told the Scottish Women's Institute in 1961. Can you tell the difference between them? He said to President Obama, who had explained that he'd had breakfast with leaders of the UK, China, and Russia in 2009. I'll include a link so you can read all the rest of these funny quotes. On a more serious note, the former President Barack Obama posted this yesterday. When we, Michelle and I, he said, first met His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, he and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II had already been on the world stage for more than half a century, welcoming leaders like Churchill and Kennedy, Mandela and Gorbachev. As two Americans unaccustomed to palaces and pomp, we didn't know what to expect. We shouldn't have worried. The Queen and Prince Philip immediately put us at ease with their grace and generosity, turning a ceremonial occasion into something far more natural, even comfortable. Prince Philip in particular was kind and warm, with a sharp wit and unfailing good humor. It was our first introduction to the man behind the title, and in the years since, our admiration for him has only grown. We will miss him dearly. Like the Queen, Prince Philip saw world wars and economic crisis come and go. The radio gave way to the television, and the television to the internet, and through it all he helped provide steady leadership and guiding wisdom. It has long been said that the United States and Great Britain have a special relationship, one that has been maintained and strengthened not just by presidents and prime ministers, but by the royal family that has outlasted them all. At the Queen's side, or trailing the customary 2 steps behind, Prince Philip showed the world what it meant to be a supportive husband to a powerful woman. Yet he also found a way to lead without demanding the spotlight, serving in combat in World War II, commanding a frigate in the Royal Navy, and tirelessly touring the world to champion British industry and excellence. Through his extraordinary example, he proved that true partnership has room for both ambition and selflessness, all in service of something greater. As the world mourns his loss, we send our warmest wishes and deepest sympathies to the Queen, their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and everyone who knew and loved this remarkable man. That was President Obama's post yesterday. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the former Duke and Duchess of Sussex, also paid tribute to the royal on their Archewell website. Quote, in loving memory of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, 1921 to 2021, thank you for your service. You will be greatly missed. Unquote. 3 days prior to the news of Prince Philip's passing, on April 6, a post ran in Today that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had announced their first project for Netflix will be a docuseries titled Heart of Invictus, following the athletic event that Harry created, the Invictus Games. Okay, then, today, Oprah Daily, which began, I believe, a week or 2 ago, since she stopped printing her Oprah magazine, which is now going to be just a quarterly. She covered Prince Philip's passing, and at the end of her story, she had posted, the email came out at 5 p.m., and then within an hour, here was the first comment at the bottom of that story. Oprah, Exclamation point. It was most disheartening for you to put on this despicable display of self-indulgent recriminations by Miss Meghan Markle. Well, actually, she called her malarkey, whose outrageous statements have all been refuted during the most stressful time for our great queen to be going through. What happened to your compassion and vigorous research that you would allow such a slanted, dismal review by a non-entity as Miss Markle, who has thrown her own family under the bus, and now the monarchy? This is the height of ignorance, not enlightening emotionally or intellectually to anyone. It was a bash-a-thon, and you must do some follow-up with people of greater substance and clearer understanding to settle these false claims for once and for all. Miss Meghan Malarkey is a deeply pathologically challenged liar whose credibility has been shredded by every smart, decent person I know, along with most serious black royal women and journalists. I suggest you contact Jean Gasho at jeangasho.com, who is of royal birth and African, to learn what you don't know. Very important. I beg you to reveal the rest of the real truth in support of, and she says RF, I assume that's royal family, the entire monarchy, and of all who hold these traditions dearly, some 53 countries of every race and nation around the world. We are members of a holy and human race first, descendants of the living God, all with different roles and assignments to play. Yours is to reveal not a specious truth based on others' sour revelations, but a profound examination of the root of these issues, history and its progenitors. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. End quote. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan had an exclusive interview on Fox Nation's Tucker Carlson today. He compared Meghan Markle to Disney's Pinocchio and said she and Prince Harry are willfully maligning the future kings of England. Morgan warned Carlson that the U.S.-born Markle is one of the least trustworthy people, implicitly pushing back on his critics who have said he's wrong to doubt the televised testimony of the young royals. He said that he hopes Harry recognizes that, as well as his contention that Markle, quote, has a track record of ditching everyone and everything when they cease to be use to her, end quote. Piers goes on to say, my advice to Harry is, make sure you remain in use, Morgan remarked, adding that Harry's apparent principal use is being of royal lineage in order to provide Markle with celebrity fodder she can financially benefit from. How much money would they be making if they weren't the Duke and Duchess of Sussex for their anodyne view on a podcast on Spotify? Morgan asked, adding that an average American or British worker would not have the same luxury lifestyle they do. He said one glaring example is how the couple joined CBS's late-night comic James Corden on an open-top bus ride through Hollywood and Los Angeles. That happened before the Oprah interview. Morgan also said an event like that was made possible by their royal connection, which he said they claim to despise. It's actually shameful. What is the game plan? Do they carry on plummeting to the bottom in terms of spewing ever more lurid details about the royal family? Morgan also said that within days of their bombshell interview with Winfrey, the Sussexes appeared on CBS this morning. We know that Prince Charles and Prince William, our future two kings of Great Britain, called Prince Harry to discuss the Oprah interview. The first thing they did was tell Gayle King, Oprah's best friend who hosts the CBS morning show, who then broadcast this to the American people, that not only have Charles and William called, which in itself was an invasion of their privacy, but that the calls have been unconstructive. She's basically spinning the future monarchs of Great Britain. And that's just disrespectful, for one. But to do it to your own family, this is Harry's brother and his dad. I don't know how you could trust them again. Could you trust a family member who immediately rings the anchor of a big American breakfast show? All to keep the pot boiling and making themselves talked about, which is ultimately their only currency. Otherwise, they're just another couple of celebrities on the huckster trail. And then also, Pierce had mentioned that several members of the royal family had reached out to him on him speaking out. And so I don't know exactly the details of that. All right, so now we move on to other news. On Tuesday, President Biden said that he was pushing up the deadline for May 1 to April 19 for states to make all adults in the United States eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. The country's 7-day average of newly reported infections has consistently risen in recent weeks from more than 53,000 cases a day in mid-March to more than 64,000 cases. While the latest figures remain well off the January peak of more than 250,000, they're still considered high by health experts and remain close to the peak average number of cases seen during the surge in the summer last year. The CDC says 32% of the U.S. population have received at least one shot, and about 19% are fully vaccinated. And another 62 million Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine doses are in jeopardy at the Baltimore factory that already ruined 15 million doses of the vaccine, according to a report from the New York Times. The factory, which engineers the vaccine but doesn't bottle it, had produced at least 150 million Johnson & Johnson vaccine doses in total. But no doses have been used yet because the factory hasn't been certified by regulators to distribute the doses to the public, the Times reported. And if we didn't have enough problems, now we have people who are trying to offer false and stolen vaccine cards on Etsy, eBay, Facebook, and Twitter, the New York Times reported. Sellers are asking $20 to $60 each with a discount on bundles of 3 or more. Laminated ones cost extra. Johnson & Johnson's coronavirus is facing a double dose of problems. Georgia is the third state to temporarily shut down a vaccine site after 8 people suffered adverse reactions to the shot. Earlier this week, 18 people in North Carolina reported side effects, while 11 people in Colorado reacted to the shot with symptoms ranging from dizziness, nausea, and fainting. This is a really potent vaccine, and what we're seeing is some of that potency relating at a very rare side effect that we just have to be aware of, said a CBS News medical contributor. All 3 major U.S. vaccines produced adverse reactions in more than 60,000 people nationwide. For each manufacturer, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, just 0.1% of all people have reported side effects. And you know that it affects people differently, so I don't have to tell you that. That shouldn't keep you from getting one. Just be well hydrated, and hopefully everything will be okay, besides a sore arm. Another problem facing Johnson & Johnson is distribution. The company is dramatically scaling back shipments to states by 86% next week. Meanwhile, my home state, Michigan, is experiencing more. Hospital intensive care units are near capacity. And of the 1.7 million people who are fully vaccinated in the state of Michigan, 246 people tested positive for COVID-19. Now, I don't know about these testing because some are saying that not all testing is accurate. So I don't know what to make of that. Meanwhile, Michigan reported 8,015 new COVID-19 cases and 30 deaths. Governor Whitmer said, "We all know what works, and this has to be a team effort. We have to do this together. Lives depend on it." The Michigan governor is asking for a 2-week pause on indoor dining, in-person learning for high schools and youth sports, a driving factor in new cases among kids. My niece happens to work at a local hospital, and she said that the people coming in were between the ages of 20 and 50, of course, those that aren't vaccinated, and even entire families were coming in. And unfortunately, when they came into the waiting area, those coming in to be tested for COVID were also seated with the same people coming in there for other ailments. Not good. Pfizer is the first company to seek an expansion of its emergency use authorization to give its vaccine to children as young as 12. The UK variant is now the most common strain in the US, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky announced this week at a White House briefing. Now the latest numbers. 174,879,716 vaccine doses were given so far in the U.S. 79,878 new cases were recorded yesterday across the U.S. 1,000 deaths recorded yesterday in the U.S. And there's a total of 560,115 total deaths in the U.S. Meanwhile, 31,003,070 total confirmed cases in the U.S. and worldwide, 134,035,138 confirmed cases, 2,904,504 deaths. This all according to numbers from Johns Hopkins University and vaccine figures from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. On the border, a record 19,000 unaccompanied minors were picked up by U.S. Border Patrol during the month of March, part of a surge that left dozens of children in need of rescue after being abandoned by smugglers. Recently, a 10-year-old boy was found wandering alone in Texas, and a pair of girls, ages 3 and 5, were dropped over a 14-foot border wall in New Mexico. The Department of Homeland Security also announced yesterday it's investigating 5,600 additional cases of children possibly separated from their parents under the, quote, zero tolerance policy of the previous administration. The Biden White House has yet to reunite any of the hundreds of kids who are already known to have been separated. With the U.S. expelling adults who cross illegally, a record 22,000 people have instead requested asylum in Mexico. In lighter news, CBS News executive Kim Godwin will make history as new ABC News president. Time magazine ran a piece by Judy Berman on April 8 entitled, "TV is having a talking head crisis, from Sharon Osbourne to Dr. Oz to Meghan McCain." On March 22, midway through a series of guest-hosted shows, Jeopardy fans revolted. Their target was Dr. Mehmed Oz. The Oprah-approved Ivy League-educated surgeon, author, and host of the Dr. Oz show, who was the most recent celebrity to step into the late Alex Trebek's dress shoes. As viewers fumed on social media, Variety called Oz's engagement a, quote, black eye, unquote, on the show, and some 600 former contestants signed an open letter arguing that he, quote, stands in opposition to everything that Jeopardy stands for, end quote. Indeed, everyone from other physicians to elected officials to GLAAD has blasted Dr. Oz, over the years for pushing weight loss scams, giving a platform to anti-vaxxers, normalizing gay conversation therapy, and most recently endorsing shoddy COVID remedies. That didn't necessarily disqualify him from a 2-week gig reading pre-written questions and making small talk. From another angle, though, the outrage made perfect sense at a time when the idea of objective facts has been so catastrophically eroded. If you can't trust the host of Jeopardy, whom can you trust? Time goes on to say it's not like Trebek was independently verifying the game's every answer. Yet, in his 36 years as host, as the American public grew politically polarized and the public square was increasingly polluted by mercenary hucksters and partisan spin doctors, he came to symbolize a refreshing reverence for pure, depoliticized knowledge. Now, and especially during a pandemic, when TV is so many people's main portal to the outside world, Jeopardy feels personal because it represents a beloved but endangered aspect of a cultural conversation starved for truth, intellect, and insight. Maybe that helps to explain why we're seeing so many controversies emerge among the talking heads who populate the traditional tame realm of game shows and daytime chat programs. Time goes on to note that also in March, Sharon Osbourne, a longtime panelist on CBS's The Talk and a medal First Lady, exploded when co-host Cheryl Underwood pressed her about a tweet in which she defended Piers Morgan from accusations of racism. In his own on-air meltdown, Morgan had stomped off the set of Good Morning Britain amid questions about his very public disdain for Meghan Markle. Soon, former Talk colleagues were alleging that Miss Osbourne had a history of making racist and homophobic comments. By the end of the month, we all know she exited the show. Meanwhile, on ABC's The View, token conservative Meghan McCain was getting tangled in her own web of racial doublespeak. On his program last week, Tonight, John Oliver pointed out that months before tweeting "Stop Asian Hate" in response to the mass shooting in Atlanta, she'd announced that she didn't have a problem with Donald Trump calling COVID-19 the China virus. Well, McCain apologized, but then, as she's wont to do, McCain drifted back to sanctimony, decrying the slippery slope of identity politics. In its 25 years on the air, she said, The View had had only one Asian American co-host. That was Lisa Ling. Then she goes on to say, does that mean that one of us should be leaving at some point because there's not enough representation? Is identity politics more important than qualifications of a job? MSNBC host Tiffany Cross responded to those rhetorical questions. Yes, one of you should definitely lose your job. I'll give you 2 guesses, but you'll only need one. After all, McCain, the daughter of the late Senator John McCain, was not exactly a shining example of the mediocrity herself. I thought about playing the video, but I decided to skip it. Time concluded, what's dispiriting here isn't just the textbook white fragility on display, it's also the shallowness, navel-gazing, and self-promotion that suffuse the discourse itself. The talk greets the most intense phase of a society-wide reckoning on anti-black racism in a talk show that's supposed to reflect a diverse set of perspectives winds up marking that moment with Osbourne screaming, "How can I be racist about anybody or anything in my life?" at her black co-host. after a devastating wave of violence, this country may finally be ready to have a conversation about its long history of mistreating Asian Americans, and The View marks the occasion with McCain concerned trolling over identity politics. Boo-hoo. On a better note, Amanda Gorman is making history as the first poet to appear on 2 covers of Vogue magazine. This milestone adds to Amanda's growing list of wins this year, which includes reading The Hill We Climb at President Biden's inauguration in January. Appearing on the cover of Vogue's May issue, the 23-year-old Harvard graduate looked styled by Gabriella Carefa Johnson in her African print gown designed by Black fashion designer Virgil Abloh. She proudly captioned an Instagram post celebrating the magazine cover, saying, "The first poet ever on the cover of Vogue magazine. I'm eternally grateful and do not expect to be the last, for what is poetry if not beauty? What a joy to do this cover while wearing a piece designed by groundbreaking Black designer Virgil Abloh that honors my heritage." The National Youth Poet Laureate continued, "It was a dream to be photographed by the indomitable Annie Leibovitz and styled by Gabriella, who literally would carry me on her back and forth between set. Wow, my hands are shaking with love." While chatting with the magazine for its spring issue, the activist revealed that she turned down more than $17 million in sponsorship deals since her iconic performance at the 2021 inauguration. "I didn't really look at the details because if you see something and it says $1 million, you're going to rationalize why that makes sense," Gorman explained about an offer she received from a brand that didn't align with her goals. "I have to be conscious of taking commissions that speak to me." Gorman focuses on issues of oppression, feminism, race, and marginalization. In her Instagram post, she said, "This is called The Rise of Amanda Gorman, but it is truly for all of you, both named and unseen, who lift me up. Blessings to you, sis!" Exclamation point. By the way, Oprah has an interview with Amanda on Apple TV Plus. It's nearly an hour. I think it's about 50 minutes. And in it, they talk about what happened during Amanda's inauguration speech, and when she went backstage and she realized within minutes, instantly, that she was like an instant success. And Oprah told her, "Be careful, that people are going to come out of the woodworks, and you need to be careful of people who are going to try to use you." And in that interview on Apple TV, Amanda actually thanks Oprah for her advice on being careful of people's spinning their own interests. It's good to have a mentor like Oprah, despite all the problems that people are now saying because of her interview with Meghan and Harry. You just never know how things turn out, do you? Finally, I want to leave you on a happy note. Yo-Yo Ma was on CNN with Anderson Cooper's Full Circle, and he talked about what inspired him to play at the vaccine site where he received his shot and why he's comforting others during the pandemic. If you don't follow him already on Instagram, he does play, and he has since released, just recently, a couple days ago on April 8th, and you can listen to an 1.5-hour recording of Beginner's Mind for free through the link on his Instagram account, or you can download the Audible original to your library for free. I leave you with some of his music, and tomorrow on the Heart and Home podcast, join us for a special episode entitled Post-Pandemic Dreams. I think you'll enjoy it. Have a great night.
It's a time to reclaim what I call a beginner's mind. open to new questions, new connections, new explorations,